I had a couple additional comments, questions. I want to come back to an issue that Representative Cox actually brought up, and you had talked in your presentation about land acquisition and you know, the number of acres that you've been looking at over the last couple of years, and acres that you plan to add to the state game land system. And coming from an area in north central Pennsylvania with a lot of state-owned land, whether it's Game Commission or DCNR land, it's concerning to many of my constituents and people in north central PA when they see large tracts of land added to either the state game land system or the state forest system, because it immediately comes off the tax rolls and, you know, can cause a burden in some of those rural counties when you see large tracts of land coming off the tax rolls. The Game Commission currently pays a payment in lieu of taxes in the amount of $1.20 per acre. I'd certainly like to pay $1.20 an acre on my property. Senator Scarnati and I a few years ago sponsored legislation to raise that payment in lieu of taxes to $3.60, and but that additional $2.40 comes from state gaming revenue. I think it may be time that we take another look at that payment in lieu of taxes in helping those struggling communities with large holdings of land. I'd like to have you explain a little bit more about how you go about selecting the tracts of land that you select, you know, where in the state you take a look at that, what your thoughts are on the payment in lieu of taxes issue.
Well, we select based upon availability. Obviously, we like large tracts because you can manage a large tract. Picking up a few hundred acres isolated someplace is basically unmanageable in the sense of creating habitat for wildlife. So we look for large tracts. We look for tracts that are adjacent to game land so we can build on the current property. Obviously, in holdings and indentures to smooth out the lines of game land. So those are kind of the priorities, and obviously critical habitat areas we look for. We pay a little over $1.7 million each year in lieu of taxes to communities throughout the state. That's a big out of our budget. That's, you know, previously about 2 or 3% of the budget. That's not insignificant for us. Obviously, as you mentioned, the other $2.40 comes from the gaming fund. We think, as I mentioned earlier, in Clearfield County, building that game lands from a little over 1,000 acres to between 14 and 15,000, the local community came out, Chamber of Commerce, they saw that as a destination. They saw that they were going to bring people into their community and spend dollars. So there's the other benefit of having large game lands, and in fact it brings people to the area to hunt. So there is a commensurate activity economically at the restaurant or whatever the case may be that in fact adds to that in lieu of taxes for the community.
And I recognize the benefits, and I some of the benefits, and some of the benefits to having additional game lands for hunting purposes. But I'm looking at it from a perspective of counties where, in some cases, more than 50% of the ground is state-owned land off the tax rolls. You know, some of these communities actually struggle from that aspect of it when they're dependent on property taxes for their revenue and are limited in what they're receiving based on the payment in lieu of taxes. And it's an issue that I've struggled with for years because I see the state agencies such as the Game Commission, DCNR, acquiring additional large tracts of land. You mentioned a pretty significant sized tract in my district in McKean County, and you know, it further erodes the tax base. So I think we have to look at both sides of it, and maybe it is time to take another look at that payment in lieu of taxes, particularly since the Game Commission has some additional revenue to be able to help those local communities. In addition, I had mentioned at yesterday's meeting, and Representative English brought this issue up, I plan to sponsor a resolution that will study the issue of a potential merger of the Pennsylvania Game Commission and Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, particularly since both commissions seem to struggle with funding at times, and I think it's time to take another comprehensive look at it. I was on the committee 8-10 years ago when we held hearings all over the state looking at the issue, and I think it was pretty clear at that time that there could potentially be some savings by combining the agencies into one independent commission I don't think there was the political will at that time to do it, but I think it's time that we take a look at that issue again, and I plan at a future meeting to consider that resolution to study the issue.